This is the Voice of Morgantown Podcast. I'm Tyler Pepe.
And I'm Brandon Cork, and this is a WVU Sports Podcast by two suffering WVU fans.
All right, today we are going to record two podcasts again, just like we did last week. First, we are going to share our thoughts on WVU's victory over Virginia Tech. And then we are going to break down the Texas game down in Austin. So be sure to check out that after this episode. So let's dive right into it. The West Virginia Mountaineers defeat the Virginia Tech Hokies by the score of 33-10. And even though Tech isn't a very good team this year, it always feels good to crush a rival like that. And that 23-point win was the biggest West Virginia has ever had in Lane Stadium. So what are your initial thoughts on the game?
I thought it was a great win, especially, with a fan base that still wasn't completely sold on the direction of the team. Going into Lane Stadium isn't easy, regardless of how good or bad Tech is. And there's definitely a lot of question marks around WVU and Texas Tech. So I think it helped, at least me personally, as a fan, understand that our team maybe isn't as bad as we initially thought. That combined with Kansas being 4-0 obviously kind of lightens the concerns a little bit, but it was great, obviously, to bring the Black Diamond Trophy home.
Yeah, 100%. A very satisfying win. I think you're right about that. And, anytime you can get one over a bitter rival that way, it feels good. And it was great momentum starter, I think, heading into this game in Austin, Texas, because that's going to be a tough road game for the Mountaineers. But, I was kind of comparing this win to last year's win against Virginia Tech. And last year's win, although it felt good to win after that, that rivalry was gone for a few years, it still kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth how we won the game last year. Whereas this one, there's no bitter taste. The game was very satisfying. Our offense looked great. The defense had a rough start, but was able to pull it together, and they had a pretty strong showing overall. So, it just feels good to crush Virginia Tech in that fashion. We do have to be a little honest. Virginia Tech bailed us out a couple times on some key plays. Like some of the ones that come to mind is the roughing the passer call on fourth down, which helped WVU extend a drive and score. And there were several other examples, not jumping on Reese Smith's muff punt. That could have been a big game changer. Calling a QB run up the middle on fourth down with Grant Wells was a bit of a head scratcher to call a play like that in that situation. Twice Grant Wells missed wide open guys downfield, and there was a ton of penalties. Fortunately for us, 15 of them were on Virginia Tech for 132 yards. But you know what? I'll take it. West Virginia played a cleaner game than Virginia Tech did, and that's all part about being a good football team. So many times we hop on this podcast and talk about how, we're not playing a clean game, and that's why we lost. I'll give our players and coaching staff credit. I mean, they were the cleaner, smarter team. And because of that, they absolutely crushed Virginia Tech and got their biggest victory ever in their stadium. So great way to head into a tough stretch of WVU's schedule.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, kicking off maybe on the offensive side of the ball, I think the matchup to watch going into that week was our offensive line versus their defensive line. Their front seven has been tremendous. Their secondary Virginia Tech secondary hasn't really been bad all year either. But, the big question mark was going to be, how is our offensive line going to perform when they've had, some ups and downs? The numbers look good against Pitt, but if you dig in a little bit deeper, you saw that JT Daniels bailed out the offensive line quite a bit. Against Kansas, they couldn't really run block to save their life. And against Tosin, it was Tosin, so it really didn't matter. We actually dominated a quality front seven and really established the run. I think CJ Donaldson continued to reassure everyone that he is just a superstar. Justin Johnson had a really, really nice game stepping in. Overall, I thought, the offense looked really good, and JT Daniels didn't really have to do too much, which I'm fine with. I mean, he still passed for 200 yards and a touchdown. He was efficient, completing about 66% of his passes. I really can't complain about it. I mean, Kaden Prather carried the offense because Virginia Tech was really focusing on Bryce Ford Wheaton. And I think there's just so many ways that you can look at what the offense did on Thursday and see that, things are trending in the right direction. Not that they weren't offensively, but some of the question marks that we had, a few weeks ago about, who's the number 2 receiver, how's the running back room going to shake out, and how's the offensive line going to stack up against quality opponents. We've got some really good answers on Thursday. So, I'm really satisfied on that side of the ball. How about you?
I'm with you. I mean, that you could argue that's the best defense WVU has played up to this point, and I thought WVU's offense passed the test. JT Daniels had a bit of a rough start to the game, but he showed why he's so valuable because he bounced back and ended up having a solid night overall. And from all accounts, to people who were there, it was a very, very windy day, which could have played a factor in him missing a few of those early. I don't know. It was just kind of off for JT Daniels. But like I said, overall, he bounced back and had a great second half. He drove WVU down the field twice before stalling out early on, having to settle for field goals. That's really the only thing, if you're trying to be nitpicky, you can complain about, is WVU struggled a little in the red zone. They had 2 field goals, 2 touchdowns on 5 trips. But honestly, that 5th trip was the kneel downs. So you could say really they went 4 for 4, 2 field goals, 2 touchdowns when they made it down there. But after that, I mean, I just thought he was on fire overall. He orchestrated a beautiful drive to close out the first half and connected on a 24-yard pass to Sam James, and was solid in the second. So I really have no complaints about his performance.
Yeah, the thing that really kind of sticks with me so far this season is we talked about, the past couple years about how the offense just, whether if it was planned to not score points, to kind of control the clock, take the air out of the ball, control time of possession. That's kind of been Neal Brown's MO here, throughout his career. But this year, through 4 games, we scored 30 or more points all 4 games. How many times did we do that last year? Once, maybe twice. And I'm not counting LIU. I mean, outside of LIU, I think Iowa State.
Yep.
And is there anyone else? We've already done it 4 times.
Yeah, maybe I believe Texas as well.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if you eliminate the FCS school, I think you're right. We might have only have won over 30 twice last year. So wow, yeah, that is bad. But yeah, totally turned it around this year. And you brought up the run game. Let's talk about that because the running backs looked fantastic. They ran for 218 yards. They averaged 4.7 yards a carry. And it was really from all 3 guys. CJ Donaldson finished with 106 yards. Justin Johnson had 83. And Tony Mathis had 38. So great team effort. What's your opinion about how those 3 guys played?
I mean, all 3 guys are just really good. Obviously, I think CJ Donaldson is kind of I don't want to say bell cow, but he's the guy that, you're always going to see getting probably 15 plus touches in some way, shape, or form in this offense because he's just a playmaker. He can break big plays. He's sturdy. He falls forward. You really can't tackle him behind the line because of how big he is. So, he's established himself as the number 1, but, even then, he's not a 30 touch guy. You still have Tony Mathis, who, while he did fumble and kind of lose some snaps to Justin Johnson this past game, has still had some pretty solid games and is still an effective back. I mean, by no means is he someone that, wouldn't make it on another Power 5 school. I definitely think he would be in a rotation in, at probably at least half the other Big 12 schools. And then Justin Johnson, we've seen flashes from him over the course of the past 4 weeks. It's just opportunity. And he finally got over 10 carries. He had 83 yards and a touchdown. He looked quick. He looked completely different. Too bad. That's what I love about the backfield is that 2 backs brings Buddy, I think, is a pretty straightforward one cut type of guy. He's going to get you him. CJ Donaldson, just you can't bring him down, and he can go for a big play at any time. And Justin Johnson is shifty. He's quick. He's explosive. And he's shown that he's a pretty solid pass protector as well. So we have 3 guys who all kind of fill different roles. And I think that works out well for this offense because you can throw guys in interchangeably. None of them really have any glaring weaknesses. And, I think this might be the deepest running back core WVU has had in a long time, if not potentially ever, because I think we have 3 quality backs.
I'm with you. It's definitely a good question if we've ever had a running back room this deep. I mean, I'm trying to think. We had like Petaway, Kennedy McCoy, and someone else. Might have been Letty Brown. I don't even know. But we had 3 guys at one point that were so good that eventually Petaway had to transfer. But honestly, I would arguably put this group over them because all 3 of them could carry the load on any given night. Which is what I love because you got a guy like CJ Donaldson who's so good, and you want him getting a majority of the carries, but you know, you don't want to tire him out early in the season either because he's a true freshman. And so in games when you have a big lead, you can stick in Tony or Justin Johnson and maybe rust his body, and you don't got to worry about a big drop off. They're very, very capable of carrying the load. I know one thing I did want to bring up. You mentioned to me via text while we were watching that game that you would like to see a more heavy combo of Justin Johnson and CJ Donaldson. And I think that's worth talking about. Tony Mathis had some good runs, and but I think you're right. I think the combo of Justin Johnson and CJ Donaldson is just so effective because they're the perfect mix of shiftiness and bruiser running that can kind of keep a defense off balance. Now, I don't want my words to be twisted. I'm not saying completely phase Tony Mathis out of the lineup. I still want him to see playing time, but I definitely want to see a similar dosage that we saw against Virginia Tech with Donaldson and Justin out there a lot, whether it's running plays, passing plays, because Johnson and Donaldson have proven they're very competent at pass blocking as well. I mean, there's highlights that you can find online of them just lighting up linebackers who are coming in free. And the other big thing with them, they just seem to get yards in bunches, where I haven't seen that from Tony yet this year. I know Tony, when he played last year, he was breaking off huge runs in those 2 games that he played at the end of the year. But I'm seeing that a lot less this year from him, whereas Donaldson and Justin Johnson just seem to be able to get you 10 plus yards very frequently. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Maybe trying that out against Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think CJ Donaldson and Justin Johnson probably complement each other best. I do think that, you know, in terms of skill level, I think they offer the most intriguing skill set for, you know, number 1 and number 2, like you said, with a bruiser and more of a quick guy, and they're both great in pass protection. You know, I think Tony Mathis is probably most comparable to maybe like a Letty Brown, where, you know, you can kind of do a little bit of everything, but he's not necessarily great at anything. He's just a really solid back. Where with Justin Johnson, you know, you can kind of see with his shiftiness, his explosiveness, how quickly he gets up to speed, how reliable he is in pass protection for being so young. I mean, a redshirt freshman. And then also, you know, we haven't even tapped into how we can use these running backs in a passing game too much. I mean, Donaldson had 3 catches. Johnson didn't have any. So I definitely think there's a lot more that those 2 could do in terms of getting out in the flats or running little routes here and there, especially Donaldson. You know, I think those 2 are the 2 that would give the defense the most problems. It's really hard to kind of, because it's not like a situation where you have one guy who's one dimensional. You don't have someone who you're sticking in there and be like, okay, they're running it this play because that's what this guy's in there for, or they're passing it this play because this guy is a pass catcher and a pass blocker. That's his role. I think both Donaldson and Johnson are at least average or better at all the things you want a running back to be at. And it doesn't allow defenses to key in on any one of them. My only concern about, you know, how many carries Donaldson is getting, and I love how many carries he's getting, how involved he is that, you know, with him being so young, you know, you've seen, you know, at least Virginia Tech try it, is that they're just trying to beat him up. I mean, there was a targeting call there that the guy got tossed out for, but, you know, guys are just so frustrated on how to bring him down that, you know, he's still a true freshman, regardless of how big he is and how much of a beating can his body take. over the course of the season when he's only had 3 or 4 months of college level conditioning and weight training. So as much as I want, CJ Donaldson to continue to be the face of the kind of the running back room, I think it's really important to get Johnson involved and make sure Letty's getting in there and taking carries as well, because you're going to want Mathis as well, because you're going to want Donaldson in November. You're going to want him in the bowl game, assuming we get there. So that's really my only concern with overloading and just kind of focusing on two guys, because I do think Mathis helps Donaldson a lot when it comes to having someone who can run up the middle and handle some of those more physical runs.
Oh, 100%. And like I said, I don't want Tony phased out. I would just like to see those guys used maybe slightly heavier than we've seen the first 3 games. But yeah, I mean, you're right. CJ even got a hand injury in that Virginia Tech game. That's why we did see so much Justin Johnson towards the end of the game. So you are right. You definitely got to be careful about wearing them out. But also, I wanted to give the coaching staff some credit for holding Tony Mathis responsible for that fumble. I mean, I think that is why his snap count went down so much, was because of the fumble in the game. And every week we come on this podcast and say the coaching staff doesn't hold the players accountable for mistakes. Well, guess what? They did. And I'm going to give them a little shout out for it. So credit where credit due. And honestly, I think it'll make Tony a better player for it. I think that might be back of his head next time he doesn't put 2 hands on the ball. So, and also, while we're on this topic, by the way, for all of the fans who are saying fire Neal Brown and bring back Rich Rod or Dana Holgerson's Houston Cougars are number 1 in penalties and penalty yards this year. So sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was always kind of Dana's MO, though, is just, kind of let guys play ball and, wild, crazy chaos, play random, I guess. And I do think that Virginia Tech did show some positive progress in some areas that I was concerned about. I definitely think, and, this is something we can maybe talk about after, during the defense or maybe after the defense, but, with, the penalties were still kind of high. There were some things at the end of the game when it came to, clock management. But I think as Neal Brown gets more confident with this group of guys, he's becoming a little bit looser with things. And maybe it's not necessarily a trend just because it is 1 or 2 games, like in Tosin going for it on 4th down multiple times against Virginia Tech, holding players more accountable, not being afraid to play more backups. I don't know if that's more of a symptom or if that's more of just kind of that's how things shook out. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens against Texas, what happens against Baylor, what happens against Oklahoma. And, if things start going wrong, does Neal Brown kind of shrivel up and go back to his old ways of being conservative, or is he going to trust his guys? Because I think this is a team, at least on the offensive side of the ball, that you can trust your guys, and you have enough guys that if someone makes a truly boneheaded play, you can pull them and replace them.
Yeah, in terms of offense, I mean, this is light years better than any other offense under the Neal Brown era. So I feel like absolutely he's got more confidence in this group because, I mean, last year, would you feel super confident going for it on 4th and 4 with, I mean, our offense, if we're just being honest, was pretty bad last year. So we just talked about how they couldn't even crack 30 most of the time. But let's talk about the wide receivers just real quick, because no wide receiver really blew up and had a huge day. But it was nice to see Prather step up and, have the best day out of all the wide receivers. He finished with 69 yards on 6 catches. And that stat line, it doesn't jump off the page. But if you went back and saw those 6 catches, all of them were pretty critical grabs. He made a catch on 4th and 1, which helped WVU get a 2-possession lead in the second half. So, I mean, that catch alone was huge. He made several catches on the 2-minute drill drive to close out the first half, which eventually led to a Sam James touchdown. But without Prather making some big grabs, we probably don't score a touchdown there. And I know you've been waiting for Prather's breakout party all year. So on a day where
Wide receiver one.
Bryce Ford Wheaton was held to just 23 yards, it was nice to see Prather step up and make some critical grabs. So I know you had to be excited seeing that. What do you think about Prather's performance?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he has, some of the highest upside. He has the highest upside on the team right now at wide receiver. And, the crucial piece with him is just getting him reps, getting him comfortable, getting him into rhythm. And a game like Virginia Tech is something that could really pay dividends going on, because you're getting him, 6 catches is getting someone really involved in the offense. It's making them feel like, I need to go out and run my route hard every time because they're looking at me now. I think before it was easy to kind of see, okay, they're just looking at Bryce, so maybe I can take some plays off. And we kind of saw that in the Pitt game. Prather didn't grade out very well. He really didn't do anything. He did have a nice long or a nice long catch. But other than that, he had a really quiet game. And I think the past 2 games we've gotten Prather more involved. And it's really important to have 2 guys that you can rely on the offense. And that's going to open things up the seam too for Sam James. So, as those 2, Bryce Ford Wheaton and Prather, show that, hey, you can't just shade over to Bryce Ford Wheaton all the time, because Prather's going to beat you. It's going to bring those safety out to the outside, to the sidelines more. And that's going to open up those seam passes like we saw on that touchdown pass to Virginia Tech. It's going to open up that middle. And that's where Sam James is kind of the most deadliest. I mean, you remember what was it, his freshman year when he had that really big year? He was just catching long passes, in the middle. He was just beating guys with his speed, and you open up the middle of the field. You could have 3 receivers that hit, maybe over 600, 650 yards on this team this year. And that would be pretty good.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely think it'll have a trickle down effect, because we know Bryce Ford Wheaton's going to put up numbers. So if Prather can start getting in on that, it's just going to help everyone get involved. The only other thing I have to say about the receivers is I was very glad to see Mike O'Loughlin getting some passes his way as well. It was only 3 catches for 33 yards, but we've been calling for WVU to incorporate their tight ends since last football season. And O'Loughlin only had 2 catches heading into this game. Obviously, his injury, probably missed a lot of snaps those first 3 games. I don't have the numbers, but I know, they were playing backup tight ends a lot. So that has something to do with it, but it's just nice to see that they're getting him involved. I know he had a bad drop in that game. I believe it was even for a touchdown. So that hurts to see, but I think he's a guy who can make an impact. So I'm glad to see that they were getting him involved in a big game against Virginia Tech.
Me too. And over his career so far, he's had moments where it looks like, they're going to lean on the tight end a little bit more. Nothing really came of it, but I think, this year it seemed like, at least from the talk, that they really wanted to get tight ends more involved in the pass game. And it seemed like early on in the season that they really wanted Poland Day to be that guy. He obviously is kind of not performed, I think, up to expectations. So as O'Loughlin got more healthy, he's taking those snaps back. And O'Loughlin, both on blocking and receiving, has just been rock solid his entire career at WVU. And I'm not saying that I want him to go out there and get 6 catches and 70 yards every game, but 3 or 4 catches a game, I think that's a good mix, and it keeps the defense guessing. So I like this mix. If you can get him about this amount of targets every game, I think that's a huge improvement over the way that we've involved tight ends over previous years.
I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, you just have to make it a threat. You just have to make it something that defense have to respect. You know what I mean? But you mentioned the O-line a little bit earlier, but they had a great day. So let's give the O-line some love. Big props to them, and offensive line coach Matt Moore, who has taken his fair share of criticism, whether rightfully so or not. So I'll give him props when he has a good day as well. JT Daniels was only sacked 1 time Thursday night, and I don't think any pressures really. The line was getting a huge push in the run game as well. So, I mean, nothing but good things to say about them. How do you think they performed?
Yeah, it was great to see them come together, especially against such a talented, front seven. Maybe it's probably not as good as Pitt's, but still, they have some really good guys on that defense, and what they've done so far this season defensively isn't a fluke. And we went out there and we handled business. Now, obviously, maybe some of that is Doug Nestor playing with a chip on his shoulder, going back to his old stomping grounds and getting to push around some of his old teammates. But, nonetheless, I felt like the offensive line played really well. And, the key part is that, we're seeing other guys on the offensive line, not become huge liabilities. I know we're kind of shuffling between different guys at right tackle and right guard with, playing Jordan White some, getting Jaquay Hubbard in there. Brandon Yates is still getting some snaps. That's not easy, especially when Doug Nestor has to move between right guard and right tackle. But it just proves in that game that, these guys are kind of getting used to the rotation. It's nice to have different guys who can switch in and out, especially when you don't have 5 guys who are studs. You have 3 guys who I think are really good, and you have 2 guys who are kind of, okay. So you can kind of swap guys in and out as you need to, as people need a break. And you're not going to see a drop off. I don't think in the past year or 2, maybe 3, we've had more than 5 offensive linemen that deserve to play. And now we have at least 7. Again, the recruiting is paying off. The development is paying off. We're seeing improvement, which is something that we hadn't seen from, like you said, Matt Moore in previous years. So I don't know if it's because the seat got hot or he just got the right guys, but nonetheless, the offensive line is showing signs of improvement, and that's a huge relief for me personally.
Yeah, 100%. Their time of possession was 38 minutes to Virginia Tech's 21. That is gigantic. And that all starts with the offensive line, being able to protect your quarterback, being able to get push in the run game. So props to them. It all starts with the O-line. My final thoughts on offense, I just want to, give VT's punter a little shout out. He penned WVU back several times with some nice punts. And the Mountaineer offense kept finding ways to get out of those bad situations. That was really the story of the game. Is WVU had great, field position battles. Even when Virginia Tech would pin us back, we seemed to climb our way out of that to the point where we got points. I think we even got a field goal and drove like 97 yards one time. And but even when they weren't getting points, they were at least getting a few first downs to win the field position battle, which, last year was a huge problem. Even though our defense was good last year, our offense would always give them such bad field position that we lost a lot of games like that. So it might seem like something that doesn't get brought up a lot, but the fact that the offense was able to climb out of those holes when they're pinned back, big props to them.
Absolutely. The one thing, just to touch on special teams too, is that, I know you mentioned it earlier with Reese Smith muffing a punt. This is his second muff punt. And, part of the return man's job is to know when to let a ball go and when to grab it. I know me, like probably a lot of Mountaineer Nation is kind of wondering what Reese Smith has to do to lose his job there. And, he's a fine slot receiver, but him being at punt return now is more of you have to hold your breath when you see the ball traveling to him, rather than kind of, having someone back there who is safe, and that's kind of what I thought the selling point with Reese Smith was coming into the season was, he's not going to return any back for a touchdown. He's not going to get you a 20-yard return, but he's going to make the right play. He's going to play safe. And I don't think he can hold that moniker anymore. I think it's time to see someone new there. And I think we have plenty of guys who could potentially return punts for us. So I'm really hoping to see a change there because, we talked about accountability earlier with Tony Mathis, and, it has to go across the board.
Yeah, I'm with you. I heard the wind was really bad there, but that's his second muff punt in 4 games. That's just, and it cost us big in the Kansas game. So that can't be something that is happening every couple games. And like we've been saying for weeks, you got Jeremiah Aaron, who's an All-American JUCO return man. What are they seeing in practice that makes them not want to at least give him a shot. And as far as I know, Malashevich is the backup punt returner, I do believe, because I heard them talking about having competition during practice where Reese Punt and Malashevich were catching fair catches while teammates were throwing towels and stuff in their face. So I don't know if that was just to create a fun game and competition at practice, or if he really is the backup guy if Reese Smith gets pulled. But to me, I would like to see Jeremiah Aaron out there just because, like you said, Reese Smith, I mean, he's okay, but even if he is, cleanly catching these punts, is he really a threat to, bust off a big run for you? I don't think he's done it yet this year, and he's muffed 2 punts. So what is the upside of putting him back there at punts?
Yeah, and it's kind of curious that Malashevich is, I think he's his backup because, return man is probably one of the positions that's most prone to injury. You got to think people are flying down there, and if you get hit the wrong way, you're out. But he's also the holder on kicks. So I don't know if, even if he is the second best guy, since he's the holder, it's hard to switch that in the middle of the season. So I'd rather have someone else, be the backup, and nothing against Malashevich, but he's the holder. So
yeah,
you got to protect him because we've seen, as Steeler fans, we saw what happened with the long snapper going bad against in the Bengals Steelers game week 1. One little tweak to that perfect harmony that the kicker, holder, and long snapper have can just break everything. And Casey Legg has been fantastic this year. I don't want to have to stress over field goal kicks.
Yeah, I'm with you. And maybe I'm just assuming incorrectly that he's the backup, but you're right. I mean, he's more important as the holder. So you're 100% right about that. And Casey Legg's been solid. I mean, honestly, he's probably, top 3 candidate for special teams Big 12 player of the year at this point. So we don't want to mess up what he's doing, especially if we're going to be settling for field goals like we had to in the Virginia Tech game. You don't want to mess up that chemistry.
For sure. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so let's move on to the defense. I got to give the coaching staff credit. They were really playing some new guys out there on defense, and they were kind of trying some crazy formations. Like, I don't know, but it worked. I don't know if it was just because Virginia Tech's offense isn't very good, but our defensive coaching staff was doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it was getting results. So we'll see what happens next week against a really quality offense in Texas. But for now, you can only play who's on your schedule, and they went out there and they had a good performance against a Virginia Tech team. So what's your thoughts about the defense?
Yeah, I mean, starting off with the front 7, I think that we dominated the line of scrimmage, and that was an area that I wasn't super concerned about because looking at, how Virginia Tech's offensive line is graded out over the year, there's only really been one guy who's been solid. And, we talked about last podcast where Virginia Tech's offensive line didn't really grade out really well at the run, and some of that has the play calling. And, I felt like there were moments where Virginia Tech changed up their play calling a little bit and created potential opportunities, but it just didn't work out because they don't have the personnel to really, do those sorts of things. So they had to kind of stick with the run. And, what was it? They had more penalties than rushing yards on Thursday, something like that. And that just goes to show.
I like 100 yards.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just goes to show how dominant our front 7 was. And like you said, that, what was it, like a 5-1 where we had 5 guys on the line and 1 linebacker. I like seeing that creativity because, the times where it's good to have 4 down linemen. Sometimes it's good to have 3 against a more pass heavy team. Sometimes you want to load up the box and put 5 guys on the line, even if they're not all defensive linemen. I think defensive line is the deepest position. So getting guys out there in creative ways there's nothing wrong with that because that's how we're going to win games, getting fresh legs out there, continuously having a pool of quality guys to pull from and sub to. I love this defensive line, and thinking back to the Dana Holgerson days where it felt like it was hard to find a defensive lineman who, wasn't going to get pushed around. And now we have 6, 7, maybe 8 guys who can come in and play. and do something. So huge turnaround there. And I love, being able to control the line of scrimmage like we did against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I'm with you. WVU only allowed 36 rushing yards. I mean, that is phenomenal. The defensive front, they just absolutely manhandled Virginia Tech's offensive line. And big shout out to Jordan Jefferson. Just another big game. If you look at his stats, 4 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, that doesn't really jump off the page, but he was absolutely dominating the line of scrimmage. And the proof is in the numbers. He was the top PFF defensive player for the Mountaineers that game. He was opening up holes for linebackers and guys behind him. So, I mean, you could really make an argument that he's been West Virginia's best defensive player these last few games. He's just been on a tear, and I hope he keeps it up against a tough Texas team, because obviously Texas is going to want to run Robinson a lot. So if WVU's defense can have another dominant performance up front, that'll go a long way in us winning versus Texas.
Yeah, and another thing to kind of point out too is that while we did only have 1 sack, there were a lot of times where we were getting into Grant Wells' face, especially when we were pressuring him. He was hurried 5 times. So, compared to WVU or JT Daniels not being hurried at all during the entire game and getting sacked once. So we were in the backfield. Maybe we didn't finish, but against guys like Grant Wells and guys who are, more comfortable running or having a clean pocket, just getting back there and being disruptive is good enough. And I think, Jefferson and Stills and crew have done a great job of doing that all year. And I really hope that, some of these guys get some credit for what they're doing this year, because maybe they don't have the counting stats, but they have the impact to the game. And arguably that's more important than the numbers that you put on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, twice Grant Wells had guys open by like 10 yards and he missed them. And I know for at least one of those, the reason he missed them is because Sean Martin was right in his face and he couldn't step into his throw. So, yeah, that doesn't always show up on a stat sheet, but you just saved 7 points by doing that. So,
absolutely.
100%. Another guy that we obviously have to give a shout out to is Jacoby Spells, our boy who we've been shouting from the rooftops for several weeks to get him in there. Let's see what he's got, because the secondary wasn't performing, but he got a chance to play, and really he's got a lot of snaps these past 2 weeks. And although WVU's secondary looked bad at the beginning of the game, overall, just as a team effort, they all pulled it together, and Spells even had a pick 6 to really just put VTech completely out of it. Love seeing that. That was honestly, I didn't even think about this, but that was WVU's first pick all year long. I didn't even realize that until, after the game. But, what are your thoughts about the secondary bouncing back after a rough start?
Yeah, I think early on in the game, I felt like Virginia Tech was coming close to breaking through and making things a game. There were numerous times where, you even alluded to it, where they had guys open the field and Wells was that close to hitting someone for a big play. There were times where it seemed like they wanted to, go up tempo and start passing the ball. Unfortunately, they couldn't sustain those drives, and we were able to kind of, get our feet underneath of us and stabilize. But I also think, seeing what Jacoby Spells did really kind of showed that he's someone who deserves to get more playing time, because even though Virginia Tech wasn't able to capitalize on some of the mistakes we had in the secondary, guys like Ajayi and McCormick and crew were still getting beat against a Virginia Tech team who frankly just doesn't have very many good receivers. So, they were getting beat all season long by every team that we've played against. I think McCormick has been better than Ajayi, but Ajayi, and he's probably a great kid, probably a great student, but he's just not a great cornerback right now. And he is I think a 5th-year senior. He's a transfer from a smaller school. And he's just not working. And Jacoby Spells has kind of the pedigree, and he came in and didn't play the whole game. He played, didn't look at the snap counts, but probably about half the snaps, I think. And he made a play, and he wasn't getting beat deep, at least that you could noticeably see. They weren't targeting him. Even on that pick, they weren't really targeting him. He jumped in and made the play. So, he's someone that we definitely need to see more of, and we need to see him full time, I think, even though he is a freshman and he may, not have the conditioning needed to play a full 4 quarters. Playing him as many snaps as he is capable of playing, I think, is crucial to the secondary success for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. We talked about how Jordan Jefferson was the highest PFF for a West Virginia defensive player that game. Spells was second on that list. And I know Spells did have mistakes. Like, he was one of the guys that got burnt by Christian Moss. And that's, one of the throws that Grant Wells way overthrew. And so he lucked out because he might have gave up an easy 7 there. But he is young. He's a freshman. He is going to make mistakes. But, that's how he's going to learn. Like you alluded to earlier, some of the guys who've gotten a lot of playing time, they just don't seem to be greatly improving. Whereas you have this young guy who's going to go in. He's also going to make mistakes, but he's also going to be aggressive. I mean, how often do you see West Virginia's defensive zone kind of sit back, allow underneath passes that go for first downs, and then they come up and tackle? Whereas, Spells could have easily did that on that play, but man, he was aggressive. He saw Wells' eyes and he just went for it. And sometimes if you're a defense that's going to give up a lot of points, you do need to be aggressive and force turnovers. So, like you said, he can't start all the time. He can't play every snap count. He's a true freshman. That probably wouldn't be a great idea, but I would love to see his snap counts go up little by little each game and just keep getting him experience. And who knows, maybe by next year you got another Charles Woods on your hand.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it'd be great to, for the guys who are underperforming, the guys who are underperforming in our secondary are older guys. They're guys who have been around the block. You kind of know what they are, but that's kind of, their faults are their faults, and they're not going to really grow that much more as a player at this level, I don't think. So, obviously I think Spells has earned, a majority of the snaps at one of the corners position. And obviously when Charles Woods comes back, he deserves them. But when you give those guys a break, if you want to play McCormick, you want to play Ajayi, you want to, rotate in Wilson Lamp, you want to rotate in, these other guys, it doesn't hurt to share the remainder of those snaps between 4 or 5 different guys and just try to figure out who works, because guys like Mumu Bin Wanhad and Wilson Lamp and even Spells aren't going to get better just by practice alone. I think these guys are guys who played at such a high level in high school that getting them in real game action is going to really help raise their ceiling, because they're going to be able to learn from real world mistakes. And that's kind of how we're going to figure out if these guys are real quality players or if they were just, great on some recruiting website. So give them an opportunity to sink or swim. And, then if we bitch and say, well, this guy shouldn't be playing because he's failing, then, then play McCormick and Ajayi. But until then, give everyone a fair shot.
At least you tried. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. Just to round out, some of our thoughts on defense, Tech was only 2 for 10 on 3rd down and 0 for 2 on 4th down. So again, our defense was just phenomenal. Big props to them. We're rough on them when they have bad games, so I'm going to give them as much praise as possible when they perform well. And in the past 2 games, West Virginia's defense has only allowed 10 points. Because once again, remember, Towson, that 7 points was from a kickoff. So in 2 games, the defense has really bounced back, only allowed 2 scores. And, obviously they weren't great offenses, but this could be huge confident booster heading into that Texas game where they are going to be challenged. So you love to see it. And hopefully this is where they turn the corner this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, just a few things we want to talk about. Neal Brown, I saw some people online complaining about this, was kind of milking the clock with about 13 minutes to go in that game with WVU only up 23-10, which, it's still a relatively close game. So just kind of break it down. They dialed up a pass that gained 27 yards to Reese Smith, and then they never passed the ball again for the next 13 minutes. The Mountaineers were in field goal range after that pass, but they ran it 3 straight times to end the drive. Even on 3rd and 6, they decided to just run it and take the field goal. But you know what? After that, the run game was working. They finished the game with 9 straight runs before kneeling it down, and they were picking up first downs and moving the ball. So I get it. He was just trying to get out of there. I don't have a huge problem with it in this game. The game seemed out of hand. Virginia Tech, they're not a very good team offensively, so you don't have to worry about them, putting up 21 points in a couple minutes. And like we said, the run game was working, so it wasn't like you were just going 3 and out and punting. And here's the other big thing. WVU was coming off of a short week. And so, why drag out the game? Run that clock, get out of there healthy, get ready for Texas. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
I can see that to a point, but I think with that amount of time, even as anemic of an offense Virginia Tech has or an opponent may have, you're only one mistake away from it being a ball game and completely flipping momentum on the road. So, I would have been fine with it if you're up 3 scores, but with 2 scores, I still think, in my opinion, is to be aggressive for one more drive, score another touchdown. And if you're up 3 scores with 10 minutes left, 8 minutes left, whatever, you can run the ball more. You can, maybe even play some backups at that point in time. Maybe not across the board, but, get some fresh faces in there, get some fresh legs in there that you're not worried about getting injured or things like that. But to me, just knowing how college football is, we've all seen situations where a comfortable situation can flip in 10 seconds. And knowing how many times WVU has faltered, Pitt, Kansas, those all flipped in 10 seconds. Someone fumbles, someone misses a block, anything like that happens, and they return it to the house. Lane Stadium lights up, and then it's a ball game again. With 3 scores, I would feel a little bit more comfortable. So, maybe it was, kind of to your point, a short week and just wanting to get out of there. But, it comes back to my thoughts that I've said several times over this past season was the killer instinct. You got to go in there and finish. You got to finish them. I'm not asking for them to go out there and try to bury teams by 40 points every game, although it would be nice. But finish off a team. Put them in a situation where they just can't come back. And a mistake isn't going to put you behind the 8 ball. That's really my only concern with trying to drain the clock with that much time left in the 4th.
And I can see where you're coming from with that. I've definitely done my fair share of saying Neal Brown doesn't have that killer instinct. And I mean, I'll give him credit where credit is due. He went for it on 4th down twice that game, converted one to Prather. The second one, VT bailed us out with a roughing the passer call. But, I'll give him a pass just because, like I said, it's a short week. He was probably just trying to get out of there with everyone still healthy. I have been guilty of making up excuses for him in the past, and this is another case of me doing that. I'll just be honest.
I'm hoping it's not something that rears its head again. I'm hoping, we go into Texas and we have the opportunity to really just put our foot on their neck and we do it. That's the one thing that, while I've seen a lot of improvement from Neal Brown, that's kind of the one thing that I think that he's lacking. And thinking about Dana for all of his faults, he wasn't afraid to go out there and just pour on points and just score until the game was over.
And everyone loved that about him.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, if you could, take 2 pieces of coaches, you could take that piece of Dana and give it to Neal. I think we'd be a lot better off. And my heart would be a lot more healthy.
Yeah. If you could make a coach, that would be a good mixture right there. So yeah, I mean, overall, just to close this out, it was a good win, but let's be honest, WVU fans expected to win that game. I mean, even Vegas had the Mountaineers as 2-point favorites on the road, which you don't see too often on a Thursday night game. So VT is just not very good this year. The real test for me will be this Saturday, a night game in Texas. If you can win at Texas or even bounce back and win at home against a very good Baylor team, I think that's when I'll really start getting excited about the potential of this team. But regardless, this win was absolutely satisfying, and it's nice to put it on Virginia Tech because I think I heard we can't even play them again till like 2031 because I think
Jeez.
just the way our schedules are already filled, like it's not even possible until then. So it's nice to know that the Black Diamond Trophy is going to be in Morgantown for, the foreseeable future.
Definitely.
Yeah. So just to wrap this all up, I wanted to talk about the Enter Sandman entrance for Virginia Tech because, some people were complaining online how ESPN showed it. Some people said, even though it's an opponent, we love it. This is what makes college football special. So I'm going to just throw it to you and get your initial thoughts. Overrated, underrated, or right where it should be? What do you think about the Enter Sandman entrance?
I mean, I think it's good for a period of time. I'm all for traditions, but I don't think, in my opinion, it really makes sense to have maybe I'm biased as a WVU fan, but, having the same entrance song year after year after year, I think it kind of kills the crowd momentum to some point. And I mean, in other situations too, like you can argue that it doesn't when you think of like Renegade playing in the fourth quarter in Heinz Field.
It's a great example.
Yeah. So that's a really tough question because it really depends on, I guess, the history and the tradition behind it. Like what's that? How impactful is that to Virginia Tech? In their fan base, because as an outsider, I could care less what they come out to. Honestly, I think it's kind of maybe a little cliche and corny for someone to come out to something like that. Not that I'm saying WVU picks the best songs to come out to, but I like Enter Sandman. It's a good song. It's a great song, but it's probably overplayed. I better Metallica songs, but it also depends on kind of the tradition around it. So, but I wouldn't be in the camp of saying that, this is the worst thing ever. Let's make fun of them sort of camp. It's, a few tiers down from that.
So yeah, I'm at it's right where it should be. Honestly, I liked watching it on TV. I know, like I said, people complained and ridiculed ESPN for it because ESPN stayed quiet for 2 minutes just to show it and just to let you be able to hear the fans. And honestly, I got pumped just watching it, even though that's my team's rival and I don't like Virginia Tech. To me, that got me hyped up for the game as a West Virginia fan, seeing the crowd jumping. That's why college sports is great, because everyone's so involved and excited. So, and I'll put it this way. Would you rather see a cool entrance and everyone getting fired up and ready to watch football? Or would you rather listen to 2 more minutes of the announcers just rambling about stuff that you just already heard for 15 minutes prior to the game if you're watching the pregame? To me, I wish they would do that before every football game. Just get quiet and let you be able to see the teams come out, whether we're on the road, whether we're home. To me, that gets me fired up watching that.
Oh, for sure. I can definitely get behind that. I definitely think, for the hardcore college football fans, it would improve the viewing experience so much to have entrances shown, the after game shown, especially home games when they win. Thinking of country roads, but every school has their own kind of song that they play after a win or some sort of series of events that they do. And that's what makes it special. I mean, if we wanted to get crazy, like, if you wanted to just load up on commercials, in between kickoffs and things like that, show the bands at halftime, because that's an experience in itself too. There's just something special about the college environment and all the different things that come to it that you just can't get through television. And it's great that ESPN took the time to do that. I think that's fantastic. I think it should probably be done more in a time where, watching a football game could sometimes take 4 hours because of all of the commercials and breaks. I think it adds another level. It breaks the barrier a little bit whenever you're able to show that college football environment through the TV, and makes it feel a little bit more, feel less corporate, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I think WVU singing Country Roads at the end of a game is probably the best tradition in college sports. Obviously, I'm Mountaineer fans going to say that, but I love it. And it would be cool if they showed that at the end of games, but I get it. Typically as a game's wrapping up, they're trying to jump to the next game that might've already started. So I understand why that could be an issue, but yeah, I mean, showing the entrances, whether it's for us or against us, I'd rather see that than just rambling about absolute nonsense prior to the game. So that's my opinion. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the fight songs too. I mean, I just thinking back about the college football games. There's probably so many college songs that I know just from playing those games and sitting there humming along with them as you're playing. It's another thing that makes college football special. And while I think there are bits and pieces where, ESPN or whoever's covering the game will show things like that, it's definitely glossed over for stupid things from sideline reporters or people in the booth or whatever else. Honestly, like if they had like I don't know what you would call it, but like a Sunday ticket sort of thing where it was just uninterrupted and you got to watch the whole game beginning to the end, the whole experience, and minimal commentary, just enough to kind of explain what's going on in the game, but not interrupt from what's going on in the field and in the stands. That's a subscription service I would consider signing up for.
Yeah, and with them going with streaming, that's probably something they could do, honestly, because you could just hop over to any game you wanted at any time.
Oh, yeah, and it'd be fun, too. I mean, I don't know. It's just ESPN will never do it, but, no. Fox Sports, I don't know, whoever else shows college football games, get on it.
All right, guys, that's it for us. Let's get into the Texas breakdown of that game. So go ahead and jump over to that episode. Thanks for listening to this one, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.